that applies to meaning making in general, not just language, but all the different ways people make meaning. So if you think about, for example, how kids, adolescents, teenagers dress, they're all different signals that the way you dress can convey about the type of person you are, the type of person you want to be seen as, or the type of person, the group you belong to or whatever. So in one very famous study of this process, Penelope Eckert studied girls in a, not just girls and boys in a high school in a big city. And she discovered that they divided themselves into groups called jocks and burnouts. There were other groups too, but those are the two groups that she was interested in. And the members of the different groups did all sorts of things differently. The burnouts sort of were not interested in school, and they went and did stuff outside of school. The jocks were very into school, and they stayed after school to do school activities. The groups also dressed differently. They had all sorts of different ways to show that they were different from each other. And also one of those ways was how they talked. The burnouts sounded more like the local people in the city where they lived, and the jocks didn't adopt that sort of city way of sounding. The burnouts were kind of orienting to the city in a way that the jocks weren't. So now imagine that you're an outsider, you come into that situation, you see that somebody is wearing, jeans that where they've pegged the legs, they've sort of sewn the legs together at the bottom so they're really skinny. You're a clueless adult and you're wondering, why would they do that to their jeans? These were perfectly good jeans. Why are they, remodeling them in this way? Or, somebody might look at a contemporary high school and say, well, why are some kids wearing rings in their noses? Why does some kids have tattoos and others don't? And they would just be clueless. They would not know. But in order for them to know what it means to dress a certain way, to sound a certain way, to look a certain way, to wear your hair a certain way, something has to happen for you to link that bit of meaning. To link that behavior with a meaning. And this is why teenagers think their parents are so clueless all the time, because for the parents, nobody's ever linked these signs, these bits of behavior, these bits of appearance with a meaning. And so the parents think they're meaningless and stupid. And why would you do that to yourself? And, can't you act like a grown-up? But for the kids, these signs, these ways of behaving are linked to a particular meaning. And that meaning can be called a register. And that's a little complicated why it's called a register. It might be easier to call it something else. Some people have called it a style. Some people have called it a way of being. So whatever these signs, these bits of behavior and speech are linked to is, if we call it a register, those meanings are registered. They're linked with that register. You could, if you wanted to think of it as a style, you could say they were styled, but the registered is the word that people use. So something has to, so it's words, sounds, ways of speaking, what kind of hairstyle you have, all those ways of behaving don't mean anything in themselves. They don't mean anything until they are registered with a meaning, with a register, a style, a way of being. Well, one of the ways that people share ideas about what it means to be a certain way or speak a certain way is through these artifacts. So you can be face-to-face having a conversation with somebody else and talk about, say, Pittsburgh speech or, some other way of speaking, and what it means. Or you can circulate these ideas through artifacts like t-shirts and coffee mugs and things. Now, there are many, many artifacts that circulate ideas about language. So I have, my laptop is actually sitting on a dictionary to make it higher. And a dictionary is an artifact that talks about language and what it means. So they're not all sort of junky souvenirs. There are all sorts of ways in which we use physical things to circulate and share ideas about language. But in the case of Pittsburghese, one of the artifacts include things like t-shirts, t-shirts that have lists of Pittsburgh words, or sometimes just a single Pittsburgh word. And the way that the word is defined in some of the shirts, or sometimes just the way it's written, or sometimes just the person who's wearing it serve that function of enregistering that word with Pittsburghese. So you see somebody in Pittsburgh doing something and you think, oh, that must be a Pittsburgh thing. So these artifacts are varied. I mean, there were dolls for a while that spoke with Pittsburgh accents when you pressed their stomachs. They had little, little recording devices inside. As I say, shot glasses, coffee mugs, dictionaries, bumper stickers, all sorts of things. And what happens when somebody sees one of those is either they're clueless because nobody has ever pointed out that there is a Pittsburgh thing going on with regard to language, or they link them with Pittsburgh. And people see, these are all the things that people kind of see in public. A lot of people see Pittsburgh t-shirts not necessarily being worn by anybody, but just for sale in tourist shops and in places where people hang out to like markets and things like that. So those artifacts usually don't get taken very seriously in sociolinguistics because, one thing, usually they circulate a lot of information which from the point of view of a linguist is just wrong. Like read up is not from German. It just isn't. And yet you can see artifacts that have that make that claim. So that's why linguists have traditionally not been interested in artifacts, but I think now we have become much more interested in what people think about language, what they believe about language. We're not just saying, okay, they're wrong, we're right. They're interested in people's ideas about language. And I think studying artifacts can give you quite a bit of insight into people's ideas about language and how those ideas then turn around and affect language.